Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the great state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Good morning and welcome to it. This is the final day of, it's the final 2 days, but we're down to the last day here or so of the session, and things are about to get spicy. I'm telling you what, it's the governor in a last-minute action last night, right before the new HB 57 became law. The governor vetoed that legislation. No surprise, as he said he would, if he didn't get the policy changes that he wanted. And boy, I can tell you already, the weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth has already begun. We're going to assuredly talk about that here this morning, along with many other things. It is Tuesday, the final weekly top three before the end of the session. Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets is waiting in the wings to jump into this. We're going to talk with him about it. And then in hour two, we're going to, I'm going to have a little bit of a recap, not rant. I won't rant much. We got a little bit of a recap, and then we'll finish up with Chris' story. That's what it's all. I mean, that's never going to happen. I'm never going to rant. Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets joins us. Hello, my friend. How are you?
One of those R words, right?
Yeah, it was recap. Rant, recap, recalcitrant. I don't know what it is. Quick, I forgot to mention, Monday is, of course, Memorial Day, and the show will be on hiatus on Monday. I will be sleeping in, you boogers. So I won't be here, but there'll be alternate programming. Yes, thank you. Give me the thumbs up, Brad. That's all I wanted. Just needed a little bit of a break. All right. Well, Brad, surprise? No? Yes? I mean, there's a lot of things going on here, but of course, the big thing is the biggest cut to the PFD ever, the biggest tax on Alaskans ever, $1,000 PFD. That's all we're getting. Adjusted for inflation, it's the smallest PFD since the program's inception. And they're shocked, I tell you, that the Alaska economy is in the toilet. They just don't understand how that could possibly happen. All right, give it to me, Brad.
Lowest PFD adjusted for inflation since the inception of the program. There's a milestone that we're hitting that I think, I could do it next week. I could do it the week after that, but I'm going to do it this week. This is the 10th year of PFD cuts. The 10th year that the Alaska legislature has failed to follow. The Alaska governor in the first year, and in subsequent years, the Alaska legislature has failed to follow the PFD statute, and it is noteworthy for a number of reasons. It's the 10th year. It is the smallest PFD adjusted for inflation since the beginning of the program. This year is the largest PFD cut in the last 10 years in terms of percentage of the PFD being cut. This year, 72% of the PFD is being withheld and diverted over to spending for spending.
Is it 72 or 82?
72%.
72%. Okay.
So it's 80. The deficit is taking 82% to fill the deficit. It's taking 82% of the POMV draw, but the percent of the cut of the PFD is 72%.
Got it.
We were at 71% before in 2022, but this goes above and beyond that. Over the course of the 10 years, I do these charts and I keep running totals. Over the course of the 10 years, the amount of the PFD cut, the amount of the per PFD taken from Alaska families is roughly $18,000. I mean, if you do it to the dollars and cents, it's $17,829 and some odd. But $18,000 taken per PFD from Alaska families. So it's and it's the year after. This is the year after the Senate said absolutely 2575 POMV draw. We're going to keep 25 for the PFD. We promise. We're drawing a line in the sand. That's what we're doing. And then the very next year, rubs out that line and crosses over and cuts even more deeply. That's the 82% number that they're taking from the POMV draw for government now, as opposed to the 75-25 that they said they would they would keep in place. So from a number of different perspectives, it is sort of the bottom of the barrel. Not that we can't go deeper in subsequent years, but this year is sort of the bottom of the barrel in terms of PFD cuts. I want to flip it for a second and talk about what it also is. It is the largest single bailout in Alaska history of the top 20%. And oil companies and those and non-residents, those who are getting bailed out, are being protected from having to contribute to the additional costs of Alaska government by PFD cuts. I ran some other numbers. This year's PFD cut will take roughly 28%. Nope, that's not it. I think that's in the next segment, Michael.
No, you ignore that. Ignore the man behind the curtain.
This year's PFD cut will take roughly 28% of the adjusted gross income from the lowest 20% of Alaska residents, roughly 12.5%. From the lower middle income bracket, roughly 9.2% from the upper middle income bracket. That's the effect of this year's PFD cut. How much is being taken out of the pockets, out of the income of Alaska families? 9.2% of adjusted gross income from the upper middle income bracket, but only 3%. From the top 20%, only 1.5% from the top 5%, only 0.7%, 0.7% from the top 1%, and zero, of course, from non-residents. The overall average that's being taken of adjusted gross income from Alaska families is about 5.5%, a little under 5.5%, 5.4%. From overall from the pockets of Alaska families. That's the effect of the PFD cut. That's the tax rate. If you want to think about PFD cuts in terms of taxes, that's the overall tax rate from Alaska families. If the burden was spread evenly, flat across all Alaska families, but against that 5.5%, more is being taken from 80% of Alaska families, from middle and lower income Alaska families. More is being taken from 80% of Alaska families than is being taken from the top 20%. And of course, none is being taken from non-residents and the oil companies, who haven't had a tax code revision since 2013. The oil companies are avoiding paying the additional costs of government. So it's we've hit. In terms of the 10th year, we've hit a milestone where we ought to be looking back at what the impact is. That 10 years also coincides, incidentally, with the period of time during which we've had working Alaska families working Alaska families out migrating from the state, the decline in the state's population, working age population. And it's also not uncoincidentally, it coincides with the period of time where the top 20% has increased, has grown in terms of its share of the population of Alaska. So we're seeing the effects, whether those in the legislature want to admit it or not. We're seeing the effects of the PFD cut over that period of time. There was an interesting Rob Meyer sent a clip last night of a debate on the House floor yesterday, where they were debating a bill where the legislature was proposing, or some in the legislature were proposing, to subsidize the student loans, pay back the student loans, or pay the student loans for those moving to Alaska to fill certain slots, teaching slots or government slots. There was an interesting debate yesterday about where those in the legislature proposing that subsidy were describing it as important to stem the tide on outmigration and to bring Alaska families, bring people back into Alaska, to grow Alaska families, to spend government money in terms of paying off student loans, to bring a select group of outsiders or insiders to Alaska and help them subsidize their student loans. The only person who mentioned the PFD was Kevin McCabe. To his credit, Kevin pointed out that at the same time that some are proposing to do that, the PFD's been cut, and we've had outmigration in those who are most affected by the PFD cuts, and the private economy has declined during that period of time. And so it's really, I mean, you can just see what's going on in the legislature in terms of some proposing to take PFDs, make the situation worse for middle and lower income Alaska families, take income from them, shield the top 20% non-residents and the oil companies from contributing to the share to government costs, take money from middle and lower income Alaska families, and then give it to a certain subset of Alaska families and subsidize them. Provide financial incentives to grow that sector of the economy at the same time as you're taking out the PFD and providing disincentives, obvious disincentives to broad scale, working class, working age Alaska families, taking the incentive away from them, creating disincentives by PFD cuts. So it is. Oh, and by the way, that bill passed the House to tell you where we are. To tell you where we are in the legislature. So we've come to sort of a spot in the road where it's useful to reflect back on what's happened. We've had 10 years of PFD cuts. We've taken roughly $18,000 out of the pockets of Alaska families over that, or out of the pockets of individual Alaskans over that period. We've had outmigration. We have disproportionately funded government on the backs of middle and lower income Alaska families. We've bailed out the top 20% and non-residents and the oil companies from contributing a share of costs, really any share of costs, toward the increased costs of government over that period. And we are where we are. We have outmigration, and we have a poorer state as a result of it.
Yeah, and again, shocked, I tell you, that we continue to have this outmigration, and all we need to do is make sure that the government workers get their incentives to come in and get paid. Meanwhile, the private sector is out there scrambling, and again, we're losing working age families and folks like that. But don't worry, we'll keep spending it better than you can. That's the bottom line. We'll keep spending it better than you can. Talk about tone deafness. Passing the House last night after all that debate and everything else, after cutting thousands of dollars from our PFD to give to some no-neck who couldn't figure out that their student debt might swamp them in the long run, is it's just so insulting. It is just so insulting at this point, and folks should be they should be furious about this.
I mean, we clearly have a we-they attitude in the state, and it shows up in a number of places. We have a we Government workers are more important than the private sector. We need to subsidize the government sector. Don't worry about the private sector. We'll just take the money out of working age Alaska families in the private sector to help subsidize the government sector. We clearly have a we they there. We clearly have a we they between the top 20% non-resident industries and the oil companies. They don't want to pay. They are big advocates. I mean Sarah Hannon and the Juneau delegation that were pushing the bill last night. They're in the top 20%. They're in the top 20% by virtue of just being legislators, because the legislators voted themselves a raise to put themselves in the top 20%. Right. They're in the top 20%, and they're saying, we don't want to pay for it. We want these subsidies. We want this loan forgiveness. We want to pay for people to come to Alaska. We just want it to be our kind of people. We don't want it to be the rest of you out there, the private sector people.
We've got to protect our team, not your team. Your team is evil. Quick tease, Brad, for number 2. What are we going to hit here in just a second?
We're going to talk about a recent announcement by the Permanent Fund Corporation spending some numbers and talk about what the impact of that spending. Yeah.
What does the number actually look like? We're going to continue with that here in just a moment. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
I mean, Brian just said, going on to number 2, was reading this morning that Harvard, with a $53 billion endowment, was earning an average of 9.7% annually over the last 7 years. Can someone get word to the Alaska Permanent Fund Board to have a call with the Harvard fund managers? Probably Harvard paid a lot less to have that fund managed as well. I mean, I would just argue that's just not surprising. Brad, this whole thing is just a microcosm of everything that's going on, and it's wrong in the government. They take the PFD and then they argue yesterday about how they need to give money to, again, a bunch of nitwits who can't figure out how to take care of their own debt. Went into it eyes wide open, but now can't figure out. Now they need a bailout. They need a bailout. Meanwhile, they're going to take an axe to every Alaskan family out there to the tune of, thousands of dollars. I mean, my family just in this year alone lost $12,000 plus in dividends because they decided they needed to spend that money on somebody else who couldn't pay their bills, apparently.
Yeah, it's people often say that the PFD program is a wealth transfer. It's not, because the PFD comes from the commonly held wealth. It is a share of the commonly held wealth. We're not taking money from anybody else to pay the PFD. It's coming from income earned off royalties deposited in the permanent fund. We're not taking top 20% money. We're not taking oil company money, because it's royalties. It's not even taxes. We're not taking any money from anybody else. And so when people claim that the PFD is a wealth transfer program, I just sort of see red. But there is a wealth transfer going on. And yesterday's debate, encapsulated it. It's a wealth transfer from middle and lower income Alaska families, from those whose PFDs are being cut to create these subsidies that are going to select groups. And that is a wealth transfer, because they're taking money that otherwise is due under the statutes, is otherwise due to middle and lower income Alaska families, and they're transferring that wealth, $18,000 in the aggregate per PFD now over the 10 years. They're taking that wealth and sprinkling it on other people. And it's just, it's just aggravating or just, ludicrous that they do that. And then to have the people in the top 20%, Sarah Hannon and others, Andy Story from others from Juneau, to have those people say, "Oh, they need it. Those people need it. Those people, we need to subsidize them. They've got student debt. We need to help them. We need to help them, bring them up to Alaska." To have those people who are in the top 20% and won't make any significant contribution to those costs, to have them argue that we need to make that transfer out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families is just infuriating. But we've had that for 10 years and can't seem to stop it.
Yep. I mean, that's exactly where we're at right now. And we keep sending the same folks back and expecting different results. And again, I don't know exactly how to change some of this, although I will say, Brad, I don't know if you caught my interview with Bernadette Wilson this last week, but it was good. It was, I mean, let's just say that she said all the right things, and she talked about it. She talked about she's fine being a one-term governor. She wants to go in there and start just whack-a-moling everything. I mean, it gives me a little bit of hope that maybe there's still somebody out there that sees the real problem for the trees. But it's I don't know of any other solution right now, because we keep sending the Bert Stedmans and the Gary Stevenses and the Bryce Edgmans of the world back to the legislature, and they're just going to keep doing the same thing they've been doing.
Yeah, I'll say this. I'm skeptical of those who argue that spending cuts are going to do it. We had that with Dunleavy in 2018. Didn't happen in 2019. Hasn't happened since. I am much more receptive to those like Ben Carpenter, who talk about comprehensive solutions, and not only talk about comprehensive solutions, but have walked the talk in terms of making proposals for comprehensive solutions to solve the fiscal situation.
All right, we're about to jump back in. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do this thing. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew, I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, we're continuing on with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top three continues. The Permanent Fund. Oh, they're spinning some numbers out there. We're doing great. We're doing great. Don't worry about us. We're doing fantastic. That 4.8% return is exactly what do you mean Harvard is doing a 9% return? We don't care. We're doing fine, just fine. Brad?
Well, there was an article in Must Read that was just the regurgitation of a press release written by the Permanent Fund Corporation. And I want to make a distinction anymore between the Permanent Fund Corporation and the Permanent Fund. The Permanent Fund Corporation is people. Permanent Fund Corporation is the manager of the Permanent Fund. That's where the problem is. The Permanent Fund itself is just numbers. It's just deposits in various accounts, and that's doing whatever it's doing. It's the Permanent Fund Corporation that's managing it, and that's where I think our focus should be, on the Permanent Fund Corporation. But there's a press release that they issued, oddly, way late in the cycle. The March results have been out for a half a month, more than a half month, from the Permanent Fund Corporation, but they're just now getting around to issuing a press release. Suzanne Downing on Must Read reprinted it sort of verbatim. The headline of it was, "Despite volatility in markets, Permanent Fund exceeds benchmarks," and they're patting themselves on the back for having achieved a return that is equal to one of their three benchmarks, or that it exceeds one of their three benchmarks. And I thought, to sort of evaluate this, it might be useful to sort of look at what the numbers have been for the last several years. So, Michael, if you've got the table that you can pop up there, this table looks at the returns the Permanent Fund has earned per fiscal year against all of the benchmarks that the Permanent Fund Corporation has used over the last 10 years, over the period. I guess it's 13 years. Over the last 13 years, and they've changed benchmarks over time. Interestingly enough, they haven't stuck with a specific benchmarks. They've kept changing them over time. The permanent fund return, the permanent fund return is in the second column, and totals over the full period from FY12 to FY24 averages out at 8.12%. And then the total fund, well, I'll talk about the S&P 500 here in a second. The third column is the total fund return objective. That's CPI plus 5%. That's basically what the POMV draw is based on. And then they have various other benchmarks they've used over time: performance benchmark, the passive index benchmark, risk benchmark, and it goes on and on and on. Over the last, what the press release is focusing on is over the last 10 years that the permanent fund return has exceeded its benchmarks. It's exceeded the total fund return, the CPI plus 5 has exceeded its performance benchmarks. It's exceeded its passive index benchmarks. But when you look at the individual numbers, when you look at the numbers by year, the reason that's occurred is because of the performance back in the 20 teens, because of the performance back in FY 15, 16, 17, 18, strong performances during those years. If you look at the year by year return, including this year, the permanent fund's returns have been below its benchmarks on a year by year basis. In 5 of the last 6 years, the permanent fund return has been below the CPI plus 5. I mean, people talk about we've got a problem with the earnings reserve, and there's several reasons for that. But one of the reasons, a big part of the reason, is that the permanent fund corporation, in managing the permanent fund's assets, the permanent fund corporation isn't earning a return that's equal to the withdrawal, that's equal to the CPI plus 5% draw. In 5 of the 6 last years, the last 6 years, they haven't earned a return that's equivalent to that. And then that's just their benchmarks that they're picking. And keep in mind, except for the CPI plus 5, these are all benchmarks that the permanent fund corporation has made up, has developed for itself. So when it says it's exceeding the benchmarks, what it's saying is we're exceeding a standard that we set for ourselves. And look, we exceeded it. But when you look at something external to that, when you look at, for example, the S&P 500, which is the second column I've got here, you can see that the permanent fund corporation has vastly under-earned compared to an external benchmark, the S&P 500. Over the course of the 12 years or 13 years that are on the chart, the S&P 500, the average return for the S&P 500 is 15.3%. The average return for the permanent fund is 8.12%, a little over half, but not much over half of what we would have gotten if we had used the S&P 500 as our tool, the S&P 500 exchange traded fund as our tool for returns. Putting that in another context, if you can go to the line chart for a second, if you can flip that up, this chart shows what the permanent fund balance would be if we'd used the S&P 500 just since FY20, just over the last 5 or 6 years since FY20, since the beginning of FY20. If we'd put the permanent fund in a truly passive index, if we just invested in the S&P 500, the permanent fund corporation, the permanent fund balance now as of FY25, the beginning of the year of FY25, would be $113 billion. Invested the way the permanent fund corporation has done, the permanent fund balance at the beginning of FY25 was $80 billion, $33 billion less than, more than a third less than what it would have been had we invested in the S&P 500. You looked at another way, the red and blue bars at the bottom of that chart show what the POMV draw would be if we had invested in the S&P 500 over that period. And just investing in the S&P 500 over that since FY20, since the beginning of FY20, instead of the way the Permanent Fund Corporation invested it, the POMV draw in FY25 would have been $4.02 billion compared to what the POMV draw was given how the Permanent Fund Corporation invested it, of $3.66 billion. The POMV draw would have been more than $300 million, nearly $400 million more if we'd invested in the S&P 500, if we'd used that as our approach as opposed to the active management that the PFC is extolling itself for in the press release. And you can see we already know what the FY26 numbers are for the POMV draw. We don't know what the ending balances are going to be for the permanent fund yet, but we know what the POMV draw is for FY26. The POMV draw for FY26, the way the permanent fund is invested it, is $3.8 billion. The POMV draw, had it been invested in the S&P 500, would be $4.5 billion, $700 million more than the way it was than the POMV draw, the way that the Permanent Fund Corporation has invested it. So you have got to look at this Permanent Fund Corporation press release extolling themselves for how well they've done. You got to look at it in context, and you got to look at it for what the alternatives are, and you've got to look at it by year to understand that all of the pluses that they're claiming are nearly 10 years ago now, when in the last 6 years, 5 of those last 6 years, they haven't even met the CPI plus 5%. There is a problem. I mean, I spent a lot of time focused on revenue side because part of our problem, at least, is a revenue problem. There is a problem in what the Permanent Fund Corporation is doing. There is a problem in how they're investing the permanent fund amount, and it's costing Alaskans money in terms of under earnings, and in terms of lower POMV draws, and in terms of lower permanent fund balances that they otherwise would have. If the Permanent Fund Corporation were here right now, what they would say is, "Oh, but the S&P is more volatile. When the S&P goes down, it goes down harder than the Permanent Fund Corporation, than the Permanent Fund does under Permanent Fund Corporation management, because we moderate, we balance out those that variability." Well, yes, and you can see from FY22 on the chart, you can see from FY22 to FY23, both funds went down, and the Permanent Fund and the S&P 500 went down more than the Permanent Fund Corporation approach did. But the S&P came right out of it and has shot off, gone from 80 billion from FY23 to a balance of 113 billion by FY25, while the actively managed permanent fund under the Permanent Fund Corporation has only gone from 76 billion to 80 billion. So yes, there is the potential for a bigger downside on the S&P, but that's more than offset by the bigger upside that you're getting out of some tool like the S&P 500 ETF.
Right. But again, if you look at it even in the longer term, you'll see that even though it is more volatile, it earns more in the long run, which is why people are investing in the major fund that way in a broad fund, because overall on the 10 and 20-year charts, it does much better overall. I mean, if we'd started from the beginning, we could have had $100 billion more, if we started from the very beginning, but we wanted to be special and we wanted to do it, our way. And yet here we are.
What the Permanent Fund Corporation press release that Must Read just regurgitated, what that press release is, and I've done this in my time in the private sector. What you've done is, okay, I've got to issue a press release and I've got to claim victory on something. So what's the one thing that looks least worst? And I'll pat myself on the back. And so, yes, you write a press release that says, "Oh, look at this. We exceeded. We were able to exceed in this one category." And if you look at the 10 years, we're able to exceed in all of these categories against the benchmarks that we created in order to judge ourselves. Yes, we're doing great. That's, aren't we wonderful? But when you look at the external world, the world outside the Permanent Fund Corporation, you look at the returns that people are getting outside the Permanent Fund Corporation, you see how bad a job that they're truly doing. And when you look at the year-by-year numbers and see that in 5 of the last 6 years, they've underperformed compared to the CPI plus 5, which is the benchmark we're using for the POMV draw. You see 5 of the last 6 years, they've underperformed relative to that. Then you begin to understand that this great press release that they're using to praise themselves is just a pile of very misleading words, and not something that reflects the reality out in the greater world.
Wait, what you mean to say is
That was just BS.
I mean, it's just that's what's going on. It's just a pile of hooey at this point. All right, well, that takes us out of the weekly top 3. You should be sharing this chart, by the way, with all your friends and relatives out there. Folks on the radio can't see it. You should go back to the video on Facebook and take a look at these charts, because they definitely line out exactly where the problems lie on this. All right, Brad, give us a tease for number 3, the final 3 of the weekly top 3.
Number 3 is we're going to talk about the Alaska government version of whack-a-mole and why it's coming up again.
All right. That brings us to the break. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. The weekly top 3 continues. Back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll return with Brad Keithley right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're continuing right now. Yeah, David just said that mirrors the the K-12 system. Big bucks for mediocre results. That's kind of what we're facing right now, right? I mean, that's what we're doing. Big bucks, and it's $1 billion a year, right, Brad, to manage that fund. That's about what they're $800 and something billion a year.
Yeah. The management fee report, which they haven't published for a while, by the way. I'm a little concerned about the delay. About a month past when they should have published the next one. But the last one they published showed that they were spending about $1 billion a year, $900 some odd million a year on management fees for this actively managed fund. When they say, "Oh, look, we equaled the passive benchmark," well, yeah, after spending $1 billion, you were able to equal the passive benchmark. If you hadn't spent $1 billion and you invested in the S&P, look at the results that we would have achieved with that extra $1 billion. But yeah, it is big bucks. We're spending a lot of dollars through the Permanent Fund Corporation.
And this is really a quiet. Nobody's talking about this. You're the only guy talking about this anywhere. It seems like nobody else is really bringing this up. Everybody's lauding. And if they are bringing it up, they're bringing it up in the context of how they need to combine the funds. That's pretty much what they're where they're at. That's what they're combining it to. Oh, we need to combine the funds to protect them. Otherwise, they're going to go away.
Yeah, I think people are just they don't do the charts the way maybe I do. But B, I think it's just the complexity of it. Somebody's going to stand up and say, "Oh, you're not doing the job you should. You're spending $1 billion and having significant underperformance," and then they're concerned about the PFC, the supposed experts, standing up and saying, "Oh, you're wrong," and throwing a bunch of flash at it. We've seen that this session with the various hearings that the PFC's been at. They have these glossy charts that show, oh, compared to our benchmarks, compared to, we get to make up the standard that we're comparing ourselves against. Compared to our benchmarks, we're doing great. And have the, sort of the MBA background of doing that. But you just look at the numbers. All you have to do is look at the numbers. All you have to look is at the year-by-year performance, even against their own numbers, even against their own benchmarks. Even against their own CPI plus 5, inflation plus 5% return benchmark. They're deficient 5 of the last 6 years. All you need to do is look at those numbers and understand what's going on. So
we don't want you to look at those. Just look at the 10-year number. Don't look at the 1 year. Look at the 10-year number. We're doing better.
Oh, and then what's really interesting about that, Michael, is when they publish their results, they publish them monthly, and monthly they use a 1, 3, and 5, 1 year, 3 year, and 5 measure, right? They don't publish the 10-year measure because it's not important enough to publish. But when they get caught and when they get in a hearing and they have to defend themselves and say how good they're doing, all of a sudden the 10-year measure comes out. And the 10-year measure is loaded, is preloaded from the good years about a decade ago. And so they get to say, oh, look at these 10-year numbers. Well, we can't look at the 10-year number because you don't publish them. You only haul them out here when you're trying to defend yourself. So I do not have a whole lot of, I used to have a lot, but I don't have a whole lot of respect for the Permanent Fund Corporation anymore.
Well, what happens when those 10 years, when they start to fall off the 10-year sweep, right? That's the worst part. What's it going to look like? What's it going to look like when those first 3 years start to fall off and all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, we're underwater. I mean, it's going to, what happens then?
Well, then we're going to hear about 15-year numbers. And then we're going to hear about 20-year numbers. We're never going to hear about the annual numbers. Oh my God, we don't want to talk about those. And we're not going to hear about the 5-year numbers because, oh God, we don't want to talk about those. We're going to hear about whatever period of time it takes to haul in those good years, those early good years, and keep our numbers up.
It's amazing. This is this a function that the governor, this is something the legislature is going to have to deal with, right? This is not a gubernatorial power. He can't change how they do those things. This is going to be something that the legislature is going to have to deal with, right?
No, it's the Permanent Fund Board, and that sets the allocation policy, sets the investment policy, and the Permanent Fund Board is entirely appointed by the governor. It doesn't even have legislative oversight in terms of who's appointed. The governor has free reign to appoint whoever he wants to, and the parameters of what the Permanent Fund can invest in now. Legislative parameters are very broad. So it's the discretion being exercised by the Permanent Fund Board, entirely appointed by the governor, that's driving this train.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. We're about to rejoin for the final of the weekly top 3, the spicy edition, the last day of session, the last couple days of session. Here we go. Jumping back into it. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Yeah. I get you. I'm dumb. That's what he's saying. I'm dumb. All right, let's continue on. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Whack-a-mole. Never my favorite game to begin with, but now we're playing it here in the state of Alaska. Brad, it just keeps popping up and we smack it. Pops it up and we smack it. What are we doing here? What are we playing whack-a-mole with?
Well, this refers to so-called investments by the state in energy projects for the last decade or so, including, and we're still at it, but for the last decade or so, the big, we ought to be investing in this thing has been the Alaska LNG project. Nobody else will pay for it, but we ought to pay for it. We ought to invest in it. We ought to invest the permanent fund in it, or we ought to invest in it somehow. And we certainly ought to keep paying consultants on an annual basis to keep it alive. We ought to keep that investment going. And now that I think people are finally running out of patience with it, and they've sort of outsourced that project to Glenfarne, and and outsourced the investment of it, hopefully, to Glenfarne, and the legislature has finally sort of calmed down in terms of oh, we need to be investing in this. Well, what happened then was we had the Cook Inlet pop up, right? We need to invest in the Cook Inlet. We need to have oil and gas tax credits back in the early 2010s, or we need to have a royalty holiday to encourage investment in the Cook Inlet. in some fashion use state money or by giving away state revenue, reducing state revenue, we ought to encourage Cook Inlet. That sort of died down too after people ran the numbers and understood what a bad investment that would have been. But you can't keep people down. You can't keep people down who want to spend on consultants and run the traps. And the latest one is an article by Nat Hertz that's in the ADN and the Alaska Beacon and is showing up in all of the other state newspapers. The headlines in the ADN version, the Alaska Daily News version, was Alaska utility execs to lawmakers. Let's revive the Susitna hydroelectric mega project. And this is the project that goes back 20, 30 years to build a big, huge dam across the Susitna River to generate electricity for the rail belt, still for the rail belt, because you'd have to distribute it through power lines, build a dam. And now that we've sort of played whack-a-mole with the Alaska LNG project, took a look at the numbers of that and said, well, that's really not a great deal to do. Now we played whack-a-mole with the Cook Inlet and not, knocked down additional state investments in the Cook Inlet for a while. You can't keep these people down. The next thing that pops up is let's revive Susitna. They're going back to the oldies and goodies, right? What project haven't we done that we need to do, that we need to spend another 100 or 200 or 300 million on consultants to figure out? And the next one that's popped up is to revive the Susitna hydroelectric project. And it's just, Michael, some people or some interests just won't be stopped. You can whack them down on one project. You can whack them down on another project, and they just pop up yet again with a third project. We never run out of ideas in this state, it seems, on how to spend state money, things the private sector won't invest in, how to spend state money on these various projects. And even though the project won't pencil out, even though you sit there and know the project won't pencil out in the long term, we nevertheless spend money on consultants. We nevertheless spend money on $100 million. I think the quote in here is $100 million just to let's revive let's re-up the data. Let's look at the data again.
Yeah, they spent $200 million on the project already. They want to spend another $100 million. You're talking about the Alaska study industry, right? That's what it is. It's the Alaska study industry who promises to study the study that they studied before one more time to see if the study needs another study. That's what happens. Now, all things being equal, we should have built the dam, as Tim says. We should have built the dam, 30 years ago. It would have provided, 50% of the electricity for the rail belt all by itself and been a project that made sense. But we keep shooting ourselves in the foot over the years. And instead we focus on all this pie in the sky stuff, whether it's solar or wind or the gas line or anything else that won't make it. This again, but it's the studying of the one more study that needed to be studied before we studied the whole thing one more time.
And this literally is that. This $100 million, the next $100 million that they're talking about is literally that. It's to go back and restudy the prior studies to see what permits would need to be done now that we don't have or that have expired, to see what the economics are now, what the cost projections are now. It's literally another $100 million to restudy the prior studies. And yeah, if there was some sense, some world in which this would pencil out and be a good return project, a project that produced a good financial return, there's some world that if that existed, yeah, you might want to go back and update the studies, and you might want to go back and look at the permits. You might want to do that. But you can tell now, just like you've been able to tell all the way along with the Alaska LNG project, you can tell now that it's not going to work, that it's not going to pencil out. But nonetheless, like a whack-a-mole, we have people who want to go back and study it again just to prove, just to update all that stuff that's useless. The stuff that was useless before, we want to update it so it can be even more modern, an updated useless list as opposed to the old updated or the old useless list.
And so your assertion here is that the damn thing would never going to work out, and it basically just shows that we're just stuck in a rut of studying everything, essentially spending money, spinning our wheels to basically show like we're doing something instead. But what is your in this regard? And I know you're making a different point than what I'm trying to say here, but if we don't do something like hydro or something else, how do we take care of the ever expanding need for electricity and energy here in the state?
We let the utilities do their job. We let utility management do what they're supposed to do. And the RCA, Regulatory Commission of Alaska, who oversees the utilities, we let them do their job. And their job is to meet the needs of their customers in the most reasonable cost fashion possible. Now, if you can get the state to pay for a bunch of it, yeah, that's a reasonable cost. But it doesn't produce a return to the state. These projects don't produce a return to the state. So you have the utilities have willingly undertaken these obligations. NSTAR has undertaken the obligation to provide gas. We've given them a monopoly in the areas in which they serve to provide that gas. They've undertaken the obligation to provide it in a cost reasonable manner. And we've set up the RCA to oversee them. Same thing with the electric utilities. So we let them do what they're supposed to do and let the RCA oversee them. Now, it'd be a different thing if utilities did a study and said, look, this is this will produce a positive return to Alaska and to our ratepayers if we make this investment, and if the RCA signed off on it. It'd be a different thing if we did that. But we had the Susitna project back before. It didn't produce those sorts of economics, or else we would have gone down that road. We've had the LNG project. It hasn't produced those sorts of economics. So it's more incremental. What the utilities have been doing is what utilities in the lower 48 do, is they do incremental steps to meet demand as it grows in the most cost-effective manner that's available at the time they foresee that additional growth. So
if they were serious about it, they would essentially clomb together and figure out how to build it themselves, is what you're saying.
Yeah. We get into these Hail Marys in Alaska. We get into oh my gosh, we're so far behind. We've got to do something. Sort of like, it's not that different from what we're doing on the financial side. We're so far behind. We got to do something. So you throw these Hail Marys. The Alaska LNG project. Oh, that would do it. Or the Susitna project, that would do it.
Yeah.
Rather than the Hail Mary, we ought to be doing the Woody Hayes, three yards in a cloud of dust at a time.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Brad, thanks for coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we are out of time. Hour 2 is dead ahead. It ought to be fun. Buckle up. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Yeah, again, it's about economics, and as I would love to see something like a large hydro project in the state, but it's got to pencil out. It's got to make sense, and if it did make sense to begin with, I think the utilities, because they've been building other hydro projects, that one may have just been a little too ambitious, and now they want to spend more money to go after it. And all of the utilities are in agreement on this. All the utilities in the state were basically on that letter to the legislature, which, by the way, they had that for like 3 weeks and didn't say anything to anybody until the story broke yesterday. Even Kevin McCabe is like, well, this is the first time I've ever hearing about it. Nobody knew anything about it. So, I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on here.
The utilities, I guess the utilities, you got to give them credit for this. If they can get somebody else to build it, if they can get state money to meet the obligation they have, then good for them. If they can find somebody else to finance their business while they get to run the business and get the returns off the business, if they can do that, then good for them. But you've got to look at the overall effect, and it's state money that otherwise could be invested, otherwise could be producing a return, or otherwise could be injected into the private economy through PFDs. You got to look at those alternative uses of the money to figure out whether it's a good use of state money. And I just, yeah, I mean,
and this is
you don't have to spend $100 million to figure out it's not, but yet they want to spend the $100 million to figure out to claim it is.
And again, as much as I'd like to see a large scale hydro project, this project is like the gas line has been sitting out there for 50 years. They've been talking about the Susitna Watana hydro project. Almost 50 years this has been in the kind of waiting in the wings, and they dust it off every now and then. The last time was about 25 years ago. They dusted it off and talked a little bit about it, but that's all they do. I mean, how much have they spent? Terry said something. If we spent the money we spend on studies, if we spent the money on projects, the projects would be done essentially. And that's the thing. We get into these studies on many of these things. Some are not economically feasible, but other ones, I mean, again, studying the study of the study that we studied before that said, by the way, this wasn't economical 10 years ago. Do you think it's going to be even any more economical today? When it was 10 years ago, it wasn't economical. No, it's not. Oh, it'll be fine today. Today is a different day. It'll be fine.
We need to, I mean, I'm not sure how many people remember Woody Hayes, but we need to grind this stuff out. The utilities are there, have obligations to grind this stuff out, to figure it out on an incremental basis as we add additional demand. These sorts of, oh my gosh, if we throw the Hail Mary and 50 things go exactly right, we might break even. Those sorts of things. I mean, I understand why they do them. I understand why, as you put it, the state's study industry push them. But it's just like whack-a-mole. I mean, you no more get one knocked down, then the next one pops up, and then you got to go over and knock it down, then the next one pops up, and you just got to, I guess, deal with them, or else, my God, somebody might actually spend money on it. So,
yeah. Well, it's frustrating, but here's where we are. Any quick? We got about 2 minutes here. Any predictions on what's going to happen with the override this morning at 9 a.m.? They're supposed to have a joint session this morning at 9 a.m. to try and override and everything else. Do they override the governor? If they does he then go back and veto out the funding part of it? For another override, which is an even higher threshold. What do you think's happening here? You got any predictions?
Well, the bill's fiscally irresponsible. It doesn't have the revenues supporting it. The legislature's gotten out in front of itself again. It wants to spend without saying how they're going to fund it, other than through additional PFD cuts, other than taking it out of middle and lower income Alaska families. So it's fiscally irresponsible. So it'll probably pass. I mean, the veto override the veto will probably be overridden because this legislature fundamentally is fiscally irresponsible. And the thing that I'm really going to focus on are the Republicans that vote for the self-proclaimed fiscal conservatives who vote for this, right, who vote to override. They don't have revenues underwriting it. So why are they voting to override it? That'll be a question for them in the next election cycle.
Yeah, no, and I see that already a whole slew of women's clubs came out last night. The Anchorage Republican Women's Club, the Valley Republican Women, the Republican Women of Kenai, and the Kenai Peninsula Republican Women all basically said, if you vote for this, you're dead to me. If you vote to override, no, we won't knock doors, we won't make phone calls, we won't raise money, we won't wave signs, we won't do anything for you. Which is probably one of the strongest reactions I've seen from any of these places in a while. That they're upset about it. So well, we'll see. I mean, the governor's got a couple different options here. If it does get overwritten again, he could still override the funding itself, or veto the funding itself, and then it takes a 45 out of 60 instead of 40 out of 60. So let's hope he's fiscally responsible. Go ahead quickly.
We've got to force a fiscal discussion. We've got to force a discussion about a fiscal plan. And this veto, and if the veto is overridden, governor line item vetoing the amount is the biggest step I know of to help force that fiscal discussion. So I don't think we should override the veto, and I would support the governor in cutting the amount down if they do override the veto.
Because again, there's no money underwriting the whole thing. So where does it come from? That's the big question. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Brad, thanks for coming on board and joining us.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming on board. All right, folks, we got more coming up. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with more right after this.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the great state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. You guys, are you ready for this? Are you ready for hour 2 of the big radio show? I am. All right, let's do it. Let's talk a little bit about what is coming up and what is happening today. 9 a.m. this morning, 2 hours from now, the legislature is going to convene in a joint session and is going to attempt to override, or is going to attempt to override the governor's veto of HB 57, the cell phone bill, which was then stuffed with all the stuff about the it was stuffed with all the monies, but none of the policies that the government. And here's the thing: this is what kills me. They are outraged. I tell you that the governor would have the chutzpah. He already vetoed one spending bill on education and said, here's the things that I want to see. And they weren't that radical. The policy changes that he wanted to see were not that radical. He had a vehicle that had those changes built into it. He acknowledged that he would do the $680 BSA increase. Again, we don't really know how we're going to pay for it, but he would do it. All they had to do was put these policy decisions in, these policy issues and these policy pieces into it. They didn't move his bill. It's still just basically stuck in a drawer somewhere. They had the opportunity to do the changes on HB 57, and all they did was pay lip service to it and then pass it over to the governor and said, here, give us our money and shut up. And now they act all wounded and shocked that it's not going to pass, that it got vetoed. So now they can gen up more false outrage by it. And there's already a story, which we're going to get into here in a minute, that goes over this. The Alaska Beacon has got the story from 4 parents who live in different areas who are just outraged that the governor would you know what they're really outraged about in this whole article? They're really outraged that homeschoolers and correspondence schools have taken money out of their local schools. They're really mad about the 30% of people who decided to quit playing around in this madness that is the public school system and decided to do something on their own. That's what they're really mad about. They don't say that outright. They blame the governor, but if you look at it and you realize it, What they're really talking about is they hate the homeschoolers and the correspondence schools and anybody that doesn't conform to their rigid ideas of what education should be. So, but there could be some repercussions. There could be some ramifications now on this, because and this was all, apparently all this stuff was just kind of waiting in the wings, waiting for the governor to act, because this opinion piece in the Alaska Beacon, which we're going to get to here in a minute, was dropped at 10 p.m. last night. They must have been ready, because the governor didn't veto it until yesterday afternoon. So they must have been ready to put this thing out there. And then on top of that, as I mentioned earlier, you've got some pretty powerful Republican organizations in the state, not the districts, not the party themselves, but the Republican women's clubs, which, if you've been in Alaska politics for any length of time, you know that they have got some sway, right? They've got some power. And 4 of these women's organizations have basically announced that they are going to withdraw their support from any legislator who votes to override Governor Dunleavy's veto of the bill. It was a joint statement made by the Anchorage Republican Women's Club, the Valley Republican Women of Alaska, Republican Women of Kenai, and the Kenai Peninsula Republican Women. They have long been very key to activating and mobilizing the base of many different areas to support conservative candidates and Republican candidates. And you notice how I didn't say those things were the same thing. You noticed how those things aren't the same thing. In the statement, the organizations, this is Suzanne Downing over at Must Read. In the statement, the organizations accuse lawmakers who support overriding the veto of aligning with union-backed politics and preserving a broken education status quo. Both of those things I agree with. I think that there is a huge drive, and this is played out in some of these articles that we talked about. There's a huge drive by the union to make sure that this is all monies that they get hold of, and it does preserve a broken status quo. We are continuing to repeat the same thing over and over and expecting different results. They assert that overriding the veto would be, quote, a failure of both principle and leadership. And these organizations are now vowing to withdraw all forms of political support, including endorsements, fundraising, volunteering, and campaigning for any legislator who votes to override. They could have gone a step further and said, we will go find your replacement. But I mean, this was pretty strong as it goes through. Here's what they say in their release, in their letter. Today, the women's conservative leadership across Alaska is making one thing clear to the members of the legislature. If you vote to override Governor Dunleavy's veto of HB 57, it's a failure of both principle and leadership, and we will not stand behind it or behind you. The women's conservative clubs and grassroots leaders who have fueled Republican victories in the state, who've knocked on the doors, made the phone calls, rallied the support, you have officially lost us. We are the moms, grandmothers, and community leaders who have powered Republican victories for years. We've knocked on doors, made phone calls, raised money, and rallied voters. But today we say enough. What the governor is fighting for does matter to your family. Stronger early intervention so every child has the foundation to succeed in school. Expanded school choice to bring transparency, accountability, and open enrollment options to every parent. Greater accountability for how education dollars are spent and the results they produce. These are the kinds of changes that put your child's future first. Let us be perfectly clear. We will not endorse. We will not volunteer. We will not fundraise. We will not campaign. Not for any legislator who sides with union-backed politics and the broken education status quo over real solutions for our kids. That's a pretty strong statement. That's a pretty strong. Bottom line, the governor is demanding more than just funding. He's demanding a system that works. If your legislator chooses more money with no change, they are choosing failure, and we will not stand beside failure. You are on your own. Man, I just feel like I need an applause button at this point. I just feel like I need a hoorah and a cheering crowd button at this point. And we already know that some of these people they're gonna jump in on it. We already know that this is what's gonna happen because it's already being quoted. Rob Yunt has already said that he's going to vote to override the governor's veto. Justin Ruffridge is quoted in the paper saying that he is also in disagreement with the governor. Justin Ruffridge of Soldotna says it was the wrong decision to make, but it's his decision to make. We've got to make decisions too, and he plans to vote for the override. I think people have been hearing from their constituents over and over again that education funding and outcomes are important to them. It's the number one priority. Yeah, but again, are the outcomes even really being discussed? Because all I'm hearing about is the funding. I'm not hearing about any of the educational outreach. So Justin Ruffridge is going to, any support he may have had. The usual players are there: Loki Tobin, Rebecca Himshoot, Bryce Edgmond, Chuck Kopp. They're all in it. But even Mike Kronk and George Rauscher were quoted early on House Bill 57 saying they would vote to override the governor's veto. I don't know if that's changed, but early on after HB 57 passed, they said that they would vote. So you had Yunt and Kronk and Rauscher, 3 of the 6 of the Senate minority. How many other Republicans on the minority side are going to jump at this and not support the governor's veto? Again, how do we pay for this? And do you really want to just give more money with no guide rails and no guidelines and no policy changes? Let's just say this could be a historic day. The legislature hasn't overridden a sitting governor in 20 plus years. 2002 was the last time they overrode a governor, a sitting governor. Palin had one in 2009, but she was already out of office at that point when they overrode the veto. But a sitting governor hasn't had an override since 2002. Thank you, James Brooks, over at the Alaska Beacon, for some of the history on that. This is all part and parcel of it. Now, even if he does get overridden today, which, again, I hope you'll be taking names. If it does happen, I hope you'll be taking names. If he does get overridden, he may veto part of the funding needed to fill the budget. Now, this has been done before, a la Governor Bill Walker's veto, where he vetoed part of the funding for the permanent fund dividend. He could still veto out the money out of that part of the budget. And that is that would be a secondary type of veto, which requires not just a majority, not just 40 out of 60, but requires 45 votes. It's a super majority, 3/4 vote of the legislature to override that, which is a much higher bar to do it. So they may stand on the podiums and beat their chests about how they're going to stand up for it, and it may not matter anyway. But of course, again, the big question is, how do we pay for it all? Somebody else said, well, what about a special session? What if we need to? Well, there may not be the votes to do that because some of the folks have already apparently made plans for the summer and other thing else. And James Brooks at the Alaska Beacon makes the example that Forrest Dunbar, who's on duty with the National Guard, is going to be on duty. He's on guard for much of the rest of this year, scheduled to be in Europe with the Guard, with the National Guard. So if they do it, I mean, it's going to be some hard stuff. There's going to be some hard times there. Now, the union involvement in this. And I just saw Harold made some kind of comment in the chat room about how it's just baloney that the unions are in control. I mean, Harold says a lot of great things about education and about, the ideas that it can't just be a BSA increase. The money's got to get to the classroom. We should consolidate. He's had a lot of great ideas. But to think that the NEA isn't the driving force behind a lot of this stuff is naive at best, complicit at worst. But the NEA is all about this. They are ready on this. And they already are trying to paint the picture. It's abundantly clear Governor Dunleavy does not care about Alaska students or public schools, says Tom Claymire, president of the NEA, Alaska. To veto not one but two bills this year to fund education is not only shameful, embarrassing, but it's a blatant disregard of his constitutional duty. He told you. He said, I will sign it into law. I will give you the exact amount of money that you ask for. All you need to do is include these policy priorities in the bill. He told them not once, but twice that they would do it, and they would have had exactly the same amount of funding. But they don't want that. Some of the districts have expressed, being okay with the policy changes that the governor wanted, but the districts aren't running the show here. The NEA is the one that's got the ears of the legislators. They're the ones that are pounding the pavement inside the Capitol building, going door to door and demanding this. We want our money. Shut up and give us our money. We don't want to hear about policies. Don't put any strictures or restrictions on us. It's shameful and embarrassing. Blatant disregard. He said he would do it. He said what he was going to do, and then he did it. And he said if you gave him the things that he wanted, he would go ahead and sign it. It was pretty easy. This is supposed to be a back and forth and a compromise. He's got the power to do it. Maybe you should have listened to him. Are they going to try and just use this to make hay in the next election cycle? Maybe. I don't know. But he's lame duck, so maybe he's got nothing to lose. We'll see what happens this morning, though. 9 a.m. Joint session. I hope you've already called your legislators or sent them emails. If not, you got about 90 minutes to send them an email to tell them, uphold the governor's veto. Uphold the governor's veto, or you're dead to me. I mean, not literally dead, but you know what I mean. No soup for you is what I'm saying. All right, we continue.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. All right. NEA President Tom Claymire sends his kids to private school. Wow, why does that not surprise me? Why does that not surprise me? I mean, come on. Oh, come on, Harold. Trump's economic policies crush the state. This is not a Trump problem. This is a state problem. His actions may have exacerbated and accelerated some of these problems, but you're telling me that it's all Trump's fault? Come on, dude, you're not that dumb. I mean, it's just, yeah, that's just not that dumb. Let's see. Oh, not Rauscher. I'm sorry, it wasn't Rauscher. It was I said George Rauscher. That was my fault. I could see his face, but I can't remember his name right now. Somebody will who is the other? My brain. Whew. More coffee. Let's see here. If those that want to override the veto, they will not get the help they need for the next elections. Yeah, that's exactly it. Let's see. Legislative leadership has already said they have no interest in a special session. Yeah. So Rob has said earlier, in fact, Rob said early on in the show this morning that he expects that they will adjourn by tomorrow night. Which will be interesting if the governor decides to veto, if they override him and then he decides to veto out the funding part of it. You know? Good for the Republican women, said Jalen. Yep. I'm going through here. Willie says, I want that light out and veto to cut the 700 down to 100. I'm sick and tired of the school and zero cooperation to change. Organizations in Fairbanks, says Miguel, have also stated they won't hold signs, make phone calls, etc., to support anyone who doesn't stand by our governor as well. I'm good. Good. Yeah. Bill says, like Gary Stevens will read my email. Well, you know. Let's hire an interior design consultant for our legislators. Oh. Well, we'll see. We'll see what it looks like. But yeah, 9 a.m. this morning. That's where things are going to get spicy, super spicy. Timothy says, we will see if they follow up through with the threat. He's talking about the women's organizations. They tend to always support status quo politicians with name recognition regardless. I would lose respect if they did that, but especially as strident and as strong as they are being in this letter, I would be surprised. Bill said, don't piss off Alaskan women. Just saying. Yeah. Miguel said they will be going to find their replacements. You best believe that. I think they should have included that in the letter. Not only will we not support you, we will find your replacement. That's what I think. We will find your replacement. We'll see. And don't forget the tassels. That's right. Tassel tax. Mm. That's what I'm looking for. All right. Had to think a while on that reference. All right. Let's get on board here. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Let's get back to it. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. Let's continue on here. One final segment before we bring Chris Story in to soothe the savage beast. I wanted to go over this opinion piece that popped up late last night in the Alaska Beacon, talking about Governor Dunleavy and his veto of the schooling override. It's written by 5 women. Rachel Blakesley, parent of 2 Alaskan-born kids in Anchorage. Colleen Bowling, who was born and raised in Anchorage, and she's passionate about providing the same level of education for her kids. Rebecca Braun, a parent and education advocate in Juneau. Polly Carr, who's got middle school students in the Anchorage School District. And Ellen James, mother of 2 kids in Anchorage. These are all mostly from Anchorage. Rebecca's from Juneau, but everybody else is from Anchorage. And they write this article in the Alaska Beacon, this commentary, this opinion piece. The Dunleavy Decline. A legacy that's left Alaska's students behind. And they go into the Wayback Machine here. All right. Now, let me just tell you what this whole article is about before we get into it. The TLDR, as the kids said, too long, didn't read. Okay. This is really a screed more about correspondence and homeschooling and their outrage at correspondence and homeschooling than it really is. I mean, that's really kind of the main thrust of the argument. And that's what they're kind of blaming on the governor right now. They start talking about James Kaufman. James Kaufman, that's what it was, not George Rauscher, James Kaufman. Somebody in the chat room said, you said George Rauscher, who's in the House, and what I meant was James Kaufman, and I apologize. As far as legislators who were going to vote to override the governor. The three in the Senate would be James Kaufman, Rob Yunt, and Mike Kronk. Those are the three that have said in the newspapers that they would override. So, sorry. So they go back all the way back to 2014 when Dunleavy was then a senator. And they said for more than a decade, he's worked to undermine the foundations of our schools. I love the verbiage on this. I just love it because it makes it sound like he's twirling his mustache. I, Ardvar Karatnik, will rule the world. Right? I mean, that's they make it sound like he's brick by brick, budget by budget. He's led a systematic campaign to weaken public education in our state, to weaken public. And when they say public education, what they mean is standard brick and mortar schools. That's what this whole article is a hidden screed against correspondence or correspondence charters or homeschooling. That's what it's about. They said in 2014, then Senator Dunleavy passed a legislation allowing correspondence school funds to be used for private school tuition. This opened the door to a steady redirection of public money towards private benefit and the shunting of millions of dollars from our public schools. They keep forgetting that public money is private money that was taken from the private economy and then given to they forget that. They forget that. Then they say 2018 to 2025 as governor, Dunleavy froze the base student allocation and has kept it virtually flat through threats and vetoes, effectively starving education budgets year after year as the cost rose. Now, they don't talk at all about the record-breaking one-time funding increases that were included in that same 7-year period. I mean, 167 million, 50 million, 72 million, 28 million. They don't talk at all about the one-time funding, but because he didn't put it in the place that they want it, this is how they phrase it. This is it. This is the art of the half-truth. Yes, it's true. The base student allocation has not changed much since 2017. But the one-time funding spend over the course of all those years is over $250 million in increases, in increased spending over the last 7 years. I mean, that's a lot of money, but it's flat funding, virtually flat. Then they start to let their slip show a little bit. Spending on correspondence programs surged. From 2014 to 2024, $580 million in public funds were diverted from neighborhood schools through correspondence allotments. Oh, wait, you're saying that because people decided to school their children in a different way than your standard brick and mortar, the way that you want? They took it from they took it from the neighborhood schools. They took it. The lack of oversight has allowed public funds to serve as de facto vouchers for private and religious schools. You could just see it. Oh man. That was their first point. The first point they came out with was an attack on correspondence and allotment programs, which should tell you pretty much everything you need to know about the rest of the article. Then they get to the second point, B, student achievement has declined. Since the 2014 policy changing expandable allowing uses for correspondence allotments, then the stuff is since the correspondence, they tie it back in. 4th and 8th grade reading and math scores have dropped. Again, ignoring the fact that in 2015 we spent more per capita than any other state in the nation, and we are still at the bottom of the barrel. By the way, how was student achievement in the correspondence, allotments, homeschools, and the charter schools? Oh, they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about that because those numbers might not be right. Diverting public resources away from neighborhood schools. Like if you're not doing correspondence, you're not part of the neighborhood anymore. And then they go on to talk about how Dunleavy proclaims himself as an advocate of education, but his record is one of destruction. Oh, the verbiage here is just fantastic. He bled our schools dry, then blamed the consequences, the teacher shortages, the ballooning class sizes, the gutted programs on the very system that he eroded. There is no intellectual honesty in this. This is all about emotion, and you don't like that. They don't like the way that some other people have decided to school their children. They don't like it. So it's going to be interesting, but you can go out and read this article. It's at the Alaska Beacon, this opinion piece. And they just continue, but this whole thing is essentially, again, a screed against people who decided that they don't like the fact that other people are doing correspondence or homeschooling or charter schools or anything that may take money away from their favored way of educating people, their children, which is, of course, the brick and mortar, schools of, if you do anything to take money away, never looking at the rest of the systems, like how much of this money is actually getting into the classroom, how much is into overhead. Forget about the fact that they did all this one-time funding. Forget about all that other stuff because they didn't get what they want. It is all disaster and doom and gloom. And again, the art of the half-truth. But you go read this and tell me if I'm wrong, that this is not essentially just a screed against correspondence, allotment, homeschooling, alternative types of schooling, charter schools. These people are upset, I tell you, about all this. Oh, it's just astonishing to watch. Now, HB 57 passed with 48 votes. They need 40 to override the governor. They need 45 to override a line item veto. But we already know that Sarah Vance has said, she was quoted in the Beacon on something else. She said she voted to pass the bill, but said on Monday that she intends to vote to sustain the governor's veto. So now it's 47 to 12. Is there anybody else that's going to support the governor's veto? I don't know how much weight this Republican women's thing has with other places, but we already know Ruffordge is going to vote for it. I don't know. Is Schwanke going to vote for it? I don't. Mike Prox. I don't know who else is. I don't know who else is on the fence at this point. But we'll know after 9 a.m. this morning. And we'll have to do the math. Will they be able to override the line item veto as well as the bill veto? We'll have to see. But we're rapidly coming to the point, folks, where there's no money left. And the governor is finally saying, I told you so. He said, I told you, I warned you twice. That's what kills me. He said, I'll sign this bill. He said he would sign it. Just put these things into it. And like cantankerous children, they just keep putting the same thing up over and over again. Shut up and give us our money. Shut up and give us our money. You can't tell us what to do. Well, we'll see how true that holds here in just a moment. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio will continue with Chris Story in just a minute.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Student achievement has been dropping since 2002. I know that the fallacy of even their own charts in this ad, even their own charts show the decline in math and reading scores goes out much further than where Dunleavy did. It just doesn't even matter. Again, this whole thing is about how evil and bad charter and correspondence schools are for taking money away from local neighborhood brick and mortar schools. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. All NEA talking points, says Kathy. Yeah. Nope. All right. I'm scrolling through here, see if there's all right. Too bad the NEA didn't support the teacher retention. Yeah. I mean, he had teacher retention stuff in there too that nobody, I guess that just shows that there weren't really, are they really there for the employees, or are they there for their own power? That's the question, right? Okay. Let's get.
Good morning, Michael.
Hello, Christopher. How are you, my friend?
Did it? Look at this. It keeps happening on the first try. That's great.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of figured some workarounds out here, so let's fingers crossed that it keeps working that way. How are you doing, sir?
I love how you took credit. I love how you take credit for it. Maybe it's me, Michael. Maybe it's me.
Oh, it could be you. It could be you. Yeah. It could be you, except for the fact that it's not. I mean, other than that, it's fine.
Right.
How are you doing, my friend? How's life in the big city?
You were going to say how's Tricks. Tricks are good. Yeah, down here in the city, you're like that country cousin, country mouse. I'm the city mouse.
Yeah, exactly.
I get it.
I'm up on the hill looking down on you peasants down there.
I'm looking down on everybody.
I'm looking down on everybody. Didn't you just listen to the show? Of course, I look down on everybody. How are things going? How's life treating Chris Story?
He couldn't be better. He hates hypocrites and people that talk in the third person, but other than that, he's very good.
Yeah, well, that's the same thing, isn't it? Hypocrites and people who talk in the third person. I mean, we've always said that that's the truth, isn't it? I mean,
deep, very deep,
very, very deep. So what is your topic of today, my friend? What is the topic of today?
Yeah, the pace of progress.
The pace of progress. Okay. All right. Pace of progress. I'm going to write that down here. Okay. Well, good. Well, then we'll be ready to go. Any other thoughts today on anything else that's going on in the world? Have you been following the legislators? You have any comment on anything else? What are you thinking?
It was almost over. What, it was like 5 days of session left, or how many days left?
Tomorrow is the last days of session.
Tomorrow's the last day. Oh my goodness, man, it went by quick, huh? You think they're going to go into extension, or do you think it's going to be resolved?
Oh, I think it'll be done probably tonight. They might adjourn.
Okay.
They might adjourn. In fact, I think Rob Myers said early on in the program, I think he said they thought that they were going to adjourn tonight. But yeah, no later than midnight tomorrow night is the. Yeah,
I'll tell you why I'm anxious for it to be over, because I'm anxious to get onto the FAIR Act, which is going to take a legislative, amendment to state statute 29. So I'm anxious to get on with that, and I don't think there's going to be any real discussions of that until the session's over, and we can get, with Sarah Vance and her people, once their heads are above water, and see if we can make some progress there. So I'm pretty anxious about that. But other than that, it's just, where's my money? Where's my PFD?
Your PFD is coming. It's just the smallest PFD in state history when adjusted for inflation. So no big deal. Don't worry about it.
I heard you say that the other day, because I think I do remember, you probably do too, that $350 check or whatever back when we were kids.
Sure.
But again, you could have bought a house for $350.
Well,
I mean, a new car.
You could have bought a lot. You could have bought a lot for $350. Adjusted for inflation, it is the smallest one it is the smallest one ever distributed.
Don't you blame Governor Walker? Right, he's the first person to unlock the lockbox.
Oh, he's definitely got some blame. But the legislature at the time too had the opportunity to override him, and they didn't do it either. I blame everybody who was in the legislature at that point. Everybody who was in power and driving the bus at that point. I blame all of those folks, and any current legislator who's continued to ignore the problem and just continues to move on. I mean, this is a huge, huge deal when you've got the private economy. And then last night, did you see that they passed the bill out of the House where they're going to pay the student loan debt for people that they're bringing into the state with your PFD money?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. Shocking. You don't really care, do you? You're just making noises at this point. Okay, Chris Story. Let's get to it.
The Michael Dukes Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
Okay, let's continue on here. Chris Story is our guest, the man from Homer. He comes in every week to give us a little bit of an uplift after we get all ranty and grumpy and dauber down about everything that's happening. I mean, just, and then he comes in and pulls out the little jar of salve and starts to, rub it on the burns and everything else that we've got going on. Chris, I know it's an image you needed, right? It puts the lotion on the skin.
Hold still, Michael. Hold still.
Yeah, that's right. Puts the lotion on the skin unless it gets the hose again. Chris Story joins us today with a great topic: the pace of progress. I don't know how he's going to wrap it all around here, but he's gonna get it with us. Chris, tell us what's on your mind today, oh guru of positivity.
Well, I was thinking about a young baby Michael Dukes, and when you were a child and undoubtedly could not wait to grow up, couldn't wait to do the next thing, crawling, then walking, then talking, then potty training, then driver's license, get out of school and get into the real world. And that pace when we're young it feels so, well, a dichotomy, to use your term. It's slow, but also fast. Like we're so, it just can't happen fast enough. But the pace of progress for us is fast. We want to go fast. We want to get there. And if you take that pace into the rest of your life, you may accomplish quite a bit, or you also might burn out. It's a little bit like the person who takes all of the road risks for you and them to get ahead of everybody, pass on double lines and going around corners, and then, you've gone the speed limit or maybe 4 or 5 miles above here and there, and you guys roll up to the stop sign or the stoplight at the exact same moment. And so it's about pacing yourself based on your own metrics, not what you see online, not the highlight reels of the world that are artificial. We all know it, but pacing progress for yourself, because in 5 years, you'll be 5 years older, hopefully 5 years bolder, wealthier, healthier, more read, more accomplished. But that pace in those 5 years is up to you. And if you're measuring against somebody else's pace of progress, you'll constantly be disappointed. I love Earl Nightingale's quote from his great works. He said, "Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal." You set the worthy ideal, but you also get to set the progressive state. You get to pace yourself as you wish. And I think a lot of times we forget that. We're in a hurry. We're in a hurry to get to a certain age to retire, in a hurry to get to a certain age or stage of life, only to look back and go, oh, those were the good old days. Man, this. So this moment right here, this is the good old days. This is where the good life is lived.
Yeah, I mean, this is another way almost of kind of analogizing the idea of, sometimes it makes sense to stop and smell the roses, right? You're looking at your goal. Don't get so fixated on your destination that you neglect the joys and the positives in the journey, right? It's always journey before destination. That's always where we need to be. How can we enjoy that as we go forward? What can we find? I'm always trying to find the joy in getting to where I need to go. Because sometimes you're right. It gets to be a slog. We're so focused on the end that then we get there and we're like, wow, I should have, you're talking about being a kid. And I'm thinking, I should have enjoyed that more. I should have not been in such a hurry to get to the next level, so to speak. I should have enjoyed it a little more while I was there with all that time dilation and, summers taking forever, et cetera.
And sometimes you look up and you go, oh my goodness, I've had my nose to the grindstone, which we need. I mean, progress is based on action. We've got to be taking action. We've got to be moving towards what it is we want, or at least we say we want in life. But at the same time, you look up and you go, oh, you look back and you go, my goodness, count the number of loved ones you've lost, the number of people in your life that are no longer living, the age on the faces of the people that you've loved, and you're just now recognizing, oh my goodness, they're aging before my very eyes here. Where have I been for the last 5-10 years? And making that progressive realization of a worthy ideal, moving towards it. Wonderful. This is all good. It's just, to use your frame of reference there about smelling the roses, acknowledging that your pace is your determination. You get to determine the speed with which you're going to go through this life. You're going to get to the end no matter what, as it's written, as you're supposed to. But at the same time, are you enjoying? And a lot of times we'll look back at the compressed life of somebody in a biography, or somebody that we know of, or they become incredibly successful in some walk of life that we would wish to go. And then you look at it, man, that was amazing. But you don't really realize that that's compressed into a biography. There were maybe 7, 10, 12 years of building towards something that we realized was Newton's theory of gravity. It's like, well, that didn't happen instantly. The apple falling on his head was actually a marketing package.
Gravity?
It's a relative term. Grammar's a relative term, you jerk. I'm not educated.
No, but I mean, I got it.
This is why your dad prefers me. This is why Ron sends me private messages.
That's true.
Asking me if I'd be his son.
You know what? It's true, because although dad would look at you and go, gravity? What?
Yeah. You numbskull, slap me upside the head.
No.
If I can bring a little bit of joy to your day, Michael, that's exactly.
You brought me some joy. But you're right, my friend. I mean, look, we talk a lot on this program with you about, goal setting and, and taking action and taking self-analysis and doing all these things. And a lot of times it sounds like a lot of work, which it is, but you've got to have some joy there's got to be a payoff other than just the big payoff in X number of years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. There's got to be, you've got to pace yourself and enjoy the little steps along the way, every little thing.
I have to And I have to defend myself real quick because I was debating between two theories of relativity and gravity, and I decided to combine the two in my mind in a quick moment. So I Einstein relativity. I knew what I was thinking, Michael. So
Einstein
thank you,
and Newton.
but
Yeah.
I'm glad that I'm glad that I was able to provide some levity in your life. But yeah, I really hope that when we think about our life, it's not going to be a moment. It's going to be a series of moments that are built one upon the other. We're going to get where we're supposed to go. It's just, are you enjoying it? Are you observing what you're supposed to be, and or taking pictures? I'm telling you, it's you look back through your device, your phone, whatever, and you see these pictures and you go, wow, look over the last 5 years or 10 years, whatever you've got on your device, and you look back at those pictures and go, just put yourself back in that frame of mind for just a moment, and then say, okay, what's the pace of progress I wish going forward?
Yeah. Well, and take more pictures. You're 100% right. Take more pictures of the ones you love. I've gone back on my phone occasionally and gone like, man, I should have taken more pictures of the kids. I should have taken more pictures of this or that or the other thing. I mean, you've got it right in your hand all the time. Why don't you just slide it out of your pocket and go snap some pics? You know, it's
and you don't mean selfies, right?
No.
You know what's funny? I was at the opening gala for the Norman Lowell Art Gallery on Friday night, which was amazing. By the way, it was just the most phenomenal experience. I hope everybody will go to the next one they put on. It was absolutely fantastic. But two couples asked me to take a picture of them against this wall with this huge, beautiful Norman Lowell painting. And so I couldn't help myself. I said, sure, absolutely. So I took their phone, reversed it, took a quick selfie of myself, then pushed it back and took several pictures of them. So I look forward to them finding that selfie.
The surprise selfie. It's self-promotion and marketing, like you said.
Yeah,
all right, Chris,
final the whole evening off.
I got a minute here. So give me your final wrap up on the pace of progress. What do we need to remember?
Decide, are you the tortoise or the hare? It's totally up to you. No judgment there. That rhymes. The pace of progress is unique as your fingerprint. So stop measuring yourself against others and their pace. You might not ever be. Who's that one guy, David Goggins? That runs 200 miles at once.
Right.
Don't measure yourself against that guy unless that's what you want. Especially the artificial online world. Just ignore it and set your own pace. This is your life.
Nice. Chris Story, the man from Homer, joins us every Thursday or every Tuesday to come in and give us the uplift. Thank you, Chris. Why don't you come meet me over at BB's Bakery? You know what they got this morning? They've got a brand new crunch wrap taco. Beef, shredded chicken, lettuce, tomato, sauteed onions. It's like a breakfast. It's so good. Oh, today only.
Sounds like it's got some gravitativity.
It's got some gravitativity. It will definitely make you feel the gravitativity of the world. Go over there and check it out at BB's Bakery on Ocean Drive. Crunch wrap taco, beef or chicken, delicioso, as I like to say in my world. That's a word I made up too. Thank you, Chris, for coming on board and joining us today. We appreciate it. We'll talk with you next week. Thanks for coming on board. All right, folks, don't forget on Monday, it's Memorial Day. I'm off on Monday. Just a reminder. Tomorrow, I don't know. Maybe we'll see what happens. I have no idea. We'll be back then. Have a good day. All right. Yummy. Now I want Chris. Are you still there? No, he's gone. I was going to buy him a crunch wrap taco. So good. The guys over at BB's, they do some good breakfast stuff. I'm literally going to go put my shoes on and go down and grab a couple for breakfast this morning because they look so delicious. Crunch wrap taco, beef, chicken, lettuce, tomato, sauteed onions. It's the perfect breakfast handful. That's what it is. All right, folks, we're out of time tomorrow. I don't know who we're going to have on. I'm trying to get some of the legislators on. If they adjourn tonight, we'll see. And then, of course, on Thursday, I got Sarah Montalbano back on the program on Thursday. We're going to talk energy and Susitna and all the other stuff that's going on. We'll be back then. Thanks for coming in. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Dukes Show.